Please be seated. So did you get that? See lots of families here today. A perfect way to talk about hating each other, as this gospel seems to indicate and almost require. Andy Dufresne, one of my favorite characters in any film, Shawshank Redemption, based on a Stephen King book written in 1982, then made into a movie in 1994, portrays a character who is unjustly accused of murder and sentenced to 2 life prisons. He was known most for a phrase which seemed to guide him through his 19-year imprisonment in this horrid environment, brutal environment, and until he ultimately escaped. And this phrase, which is one of my favorite phrases of any movie, was get busy living or get busy dying. That was what he lived from. And many people have attributed this to a kind of Christian mysticism, that as the story unfolds, you see a lot of symbolism about breaking free from the prisons that we're encased in, and ultimately finding life, finding freedom, finding joy, overcoming all that was oppressing him. But I think we need to be careful, because according to our tradition, in order to be busy living, we also have to be busy dying. We live in a culture that just wants life with no cost. We hope that somehow that will come to us with ease, rather than facing our fears and our greatest challenges. Deuteronomy inspires us this morning to consider life and death. See, I have set before you today life and prosperity, death and adversity. If you obey the commandments of God by loving God, walking in God's ways, and observing the commandments, decrees, and ordinances, then you shall live and become numerous. And the Lord your God will bless you in the land that you are entering to possess. It goes on to say, choose life. But the key is realizing that to take life by the hand, to embrace it, you have to notice what you're clinging to. Because if you're clinging to something, you will not be able to reach out and embrace life. What are you embracing this morning? What can you not let go of? What seems too scary for you to let go of in life right now? What does that look like? There is a kind of death that happens before resurrection. This is the theme throughout our Christian faith. All of us have come here this morning with an opportunity to reflect on that thing we are clinging to and to ponder the opportunity of letting it go, of letting it be handed over to the God who cares for us. Choosing life is not about avoiding death. It's about not fearing death. It's about facing it, moving through our fears and anxieties to life. And so we might amend this phrase a little bit. Get busy dying so that you can get busy living. The deaths we avoid along the way are actually the gateways into the life we ultimately long for. So I think the key to understanding the spirit of Jesus' words today is found in the opening line, which says, now large crowds were traveling with Jesus. Jesus was becoming a popularity figure. He was a phenomenon. And do you notice how Luke chooses to say they were traveling with Jesus, not they were following Jesus. There's a difference, and it stands out rather strikingly when people are described as traveling with Jesus. You know, you can go along and travel with somebody, and it's entertaining, but you may not be committed. They wanted to smear a little good news over their life. They didn't want their life to actually change, or for them to be called to face that difficult thing that was right in front of them. Jesus was a hit. Crowds were turning out right and left. Jesus could see that his revolution was in danger of becoming a populist movement. Just keep saying the right things to the right people, and he had the opportunity to become an earthly king favored by the masses. This scene resonates with other stories we know about Jesus. For instance, the temptation, where Satan tempts him with popularity and power. You can be a ruler. You can do this. He rejected that. It also reminds me of the second feeding of the 5,000, where people were expecting to be fed and were not. They turned out because they had heard about the feeding of the 5,000. And then Jesus refused to feed the larger growing crowd. He said, because you're just here for the food. You're not here for the spiritual food. He was resisting a populist movement. He was embracing a revolution, which required some serious self-reflection. I suspect that each of us here this morning have arrived with something that is trying to die, while we frantically cling to it. We can't let something go because it feels threatening, life-destroying to do so. It could be a way we are relating to someone or something in our life. It could be a dream that no longer works, an identity that is worn out, a role that is no longer us. And we want to skip the dying part, which is actually the portal to living, and go directly to life. We're okay with traveling with Jesus. Not so sure about following him. The letting go is the only way to get to the life we need and deeply desire. So therefore, this crazy gospel. He dramatically confronts the worship of family over God. We have a longing to belong, but we are created to belong to God, not a tribe. A tribe can exclude people, deprioritize the broader community, can lead to inaction and complacency. So I appreciate where Jesus is going with this passage this morning. It's hard. Why? Because it's scary to get busy dying. In this case, to break out of family systems. Children, let go of your parents' expectations of you. Mothers, stop letting your children define who you are. Fathers, let your children be the prodigals they need to be. Can you imagine them not needing our vast wisdom? Our deepest fears are almost always associated with being excluded from the systems that raised us, nurtured us, soothed us in some way, or the paradigms that have been substitutes for real life. To be disapproved of, judged, ridiculed, made less important, made to feel isolated, lonely, crazy, labeled as uncaring, irrelevant. Ouch! These are the systems where we were nurtured, held, but now have to break out of. Systems, whether they are political familial or ecclesial, would rather we just embrace the creed, the oath, or the party line, and not step out of line. Even friends can create a kind of pressure, high pressure zone. And if you don't behave the way they want you to behave, you will be rejected. Which means you can't evolve. You can't change. If your church seeks your conformity, leave it or change it. If it doesn't like your pronouns, leave it or change it. If it doesn't invite your heretical thinking, you know where the door is. Because if you are actively trying to figure out who you are, how to thrive, how to live, how to be yourself in the deepest sense, in the way God created you, then a true faith community will welcome every part of that struggle. If you are seeking to grow and break out of a cocoon and embrace the freedom God calls every person to live into, you have to let go of your desire to please other people. We all have to die to something to find our way to the life we actually need and are destined to have. We have to stop fearing the journey laid out for us and simply commit to it. A church should embrace every question, every doubt, and honest feeling you have. If it doesn't, it is settled back into tribalism that excludes others and will also exclude you if you choose to grow into what's next for you. And there's resistance. But what have you and I brought here this morning? What do we need to let go of? What is our greatest fear? Why do we fear it? What do we need to let go of or die to? How are we to get busy dying so that we can get busy living? What do we need to offer God this morning so that we can be set free and choose life? I wanted to say a word about this strange story about Philemon. Perfect example of a relationship changer. Because Philemon owns a slave called Onesimus. And Onesimus became a Christian through Paul's ministry. And therefore, you have this very interesting, almost humorously manipulative letter from Paul to Philemon saying, I will pay whatever this is going to cost, even though you owe me your life. Because if Philemon is going to respond to the life he's calling to, he needs to set Onesimus free. And do you know what that means for the local economic community and other slave owners? Chaos. Revolution. All kinds of difficulties. This is what change can do. And if we're open to it, it's scary. You're going to step on some toes. It's going to seem like a reprioritization, which is really the spirit of that Greek word. Meseo is, I think, the word for hate that is translated as hate. It actually is a word that's used in other contexts, and it can mean a kind of prioritization. For instance, you cannot serve, if you serve money, you will hate God. If you serve God, you will hate money. It's not an emotional word. It's not a violent word. It is a word that designates priority. What will you prioritize? Will you follow this or will you follow that? I like to think about Philip Yancey's phrase, as much as we want to belong and feel a sense of belonging, are not also many of the world's problems we face a result of people becoming tribal? This group accepts me, and I don't have to change. Jesus was trying to confront tribalism in every form, even those forms that seem nice. If they keep out our vision to include all people, to treat all of humanity and all creation as the presence of God, then they become tribal, they become parochial. And in that risk of not belonging anymore, of stepping outside of those communities, those tribes that you feel you belong to, it can feel life-threatening. Philip Yancey says, in the end, we serve an audience of one. We know that we will always belong to God. We will always be seen by God. And even when we're misunderstood, rejected, excluded, because we're being true to who we are, and God's calling to us, we have to embrace that. We have to get busy dying to get busy